Are we alone in the universe? Or are there strange beings who, like us, stare into the night sky and wonder, are we alone in the universe? Or do these odd creatures walk among us, monitoring our every move, perhaps waiting for the right time to usher us into a new age of enlightenment, or steal all our water? Are you surrounded by aliens even now? How would you know? Okay, anyway. Hi, everybody. This one is about aliens. Aliens in the sense of, let's narrow it down to intelligent, sentient, not intelligent, because then we wouldn't be in the gang. Sentient beings from another planet. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about science fiction as well, because that's really the only way we can relate to aliens, is how others have written stories about them. And these stories, of course, have been controlled by various factors unrelated to reality. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It might be interesting, it might not be. Also, I'm going to assume if there are aliens around here that they are monitoring everything, including this podcast. So before you do an invasion, I'm going to give you little tips every now and then to see how it works. What will we start with? Happiness. Okay, aliens might find this peculiar, but someone has to explain it to them. Humans are always trying to be happy, and they don't understand why. And none of them can even agree on what happiness is, or the best way to get to it. Most of them are convinced that they will be happy if they get what they want, which is almost universally untrue. The humans who conceptualize happiness in terms of wanting will always want. So if you want television, you get the television and you want something else. You know? That's just how human beings are. The wanting machinery is in your head and it has to be fed constantly. It's never happy. So, in conclusion, aliens listening to this do not give humans anything they ask for. They do not understand why they want things, and they will be back tomorrow asking for more. The next bit will be about Star Trek.
Hello there, Timmy. Hello, Timmy.
My name's not Timmy.
Shut up, Timmy.
So that's a sneak preview of my one-man play, Timmy in the Basement. It should be out in October. And I hope I'll see you all at the premiere performance of Timmy in the Basement, my one-man show. We went to the movies a few weeks ago to see Baywatch, because it got terrible reviews. And when a movie gets terrible reviews, we have to see it. I don't know why it got such terrible reviews, by the way. It was very funny. Like, I really liked it. I didn't just like it a little bit. I liked it a lot. And I have no idea what the bad reviews were about. Maybe they were reviewing it using a different setup. I mean, it's just supposed to be a stupid, funny movie. Like, it's not going to solve the world's problems or anything. I don't know what they didn't like about it. Like, some of the jokes were a bit, but you're never going to get 100% in every movie, are you? That's not, yeah, anyway, the reason I'm talking about it is because before the movie, there was this ad. We go into the Clonmel Cinema, and there's this they have this ident for the ads. I forget what the ad thing is called, but there's a little thing in front of it, and then at the end as well. And it's very sexual. Like, all the images are very deeply sexual. So there's like a flower opening, and there's this sperm whale jumping up and down, and you're going through this tunnel, and it's all really sexual. And I'm thinking that's very strange kind of an ident to have for an ad company. But anyway, there was an ad, and it started off saying, when you hit the water, the cold temperatures will make your body go into shock. And there's an image of all these people dropping into the water and going, oh no, I'm going to drown, And I'm thinking, yeah, alright, here we go. And they say, but if you just calm down, you'll float. And then you'll be alright, like. So I suppose you'll starve to death instead of drowning. But I assumed this was like an ad for a bank or something. You know, drowning in debt. Oh, we will give you more debt, and that'll help you or something. I don't know what the banking thing is. Have you tried consolidating your debt and just putting all your debts together into one big debt? Yeah, that's what I want to do. No. But it wasn't. It was just an ad for not drowning, and I've never seen anything like that before. It was very strange. I assume it's still running. If you go to the cinema, they might put it in front of. Well, the reason I thought it was peculiar is because it was in front of Baywatch, which is at its core a movie about lifeguards. Yeah, so don't drown was the advice. Just float. By the way, that is bullshit, right? Because I can't swim. So they say, oh, just float and you'll float. You know what? Just float and you'll die. That's what happens if you just float, you die. Because I don't know what's wrong with me, but whenever I do that floaty thing, they're always saying, just relax. I can't relax. I'm dying, you idiot. It's so easy. Like, what kind of a just relax? Are you for real? Just relax. I mean, I'll die soon. If I can't, how am I supposed to relax when I'm 2 minutes away from death? Right? That's terrible. What a terrible thing to say to somebody. Like, especially if you can swim. What a deeply patronizing thing to say. Just relax. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. I'll be dead. And I'm going to ask you, in particular, to make some sort of speech at the funeral saying, well, you know, I told him to relax and he wouldn't. Is that it? Is that your... That's my dolphin impression. Do you like that? So yeah. What's that, Skip? No, Skip was a kangaroo. What's the dolphin called? Flipper. Flippy. Yep. I always get confused between Skipper and Flipper. Flippy and Skippy. Because I know one is a kangaroo and one is a dolphin, and they're very different ends of the spectrum. But I always get them confused. Oh no, that's Skippy's the one that had that. So what do dolphins say? No, that's just a squeaky bed frame. Forget about all that. None of that matters. The point is, there was an ad for not drowning in front of the Baywatch movie, and the ad will not work for me, because whenever I do that floaty thing, I always manage to float just about 1 inch below the surface of the water. Right? And the thing about that is, you inhale water, and that's technically drowning. And a legion of people have told me that this doesn't happen. A legion of people. I can't tell you how many people have told me that what happened to me didn't happen. You know? I mean, I don't know how to deal with what instead, but they always tell me like that it didn't happen to me. Like, how could you possibly know that? How can you know what happened to somebody else? All you can say is, in my experience, that hasn't happened. Or, I don't understand how that could have happened to you. But don't give me this fucking, it didn't happen to you. That didn't happen. God, it's so irritating. Listen to these imperious pricks telling you what did or didn't happen to you. Dude, I was there. I know what happened. Alright? So fix yourself. Just say, that doesn't make sense to me. Oh, yeah, okay. I understand you're an idiot. Okay? I get it. I understand that you don't have enough fucking intelligence to be able to project yourself into a world where not everyone is inside your head. Right? Most people, like most kids, get a theory of mind by the time they're 4 years old. But for some reason, PE teachers don't get it at all, ever. And I realise now I've just made it about PE teachers. I was trying to keep it general. But you know what I mean. They don't have a theory of mind. Like a monkey doesn't have a theory of mind either. You know? But people, grown-up people over the age of 4, have a theory of mind, which just means that you understand that other people might come to different conclusions based on the same information. So don't drown. Yeah, I've found that the best way of not drowning is not going anywhere near large bodies of water. And I've since discovered that people who drown tend to be swimmers. So I've decided to not be in that risk group and not learn how to swim because I don't want to drown. People say, oh, why do you learn to swim? Oh, in case I drown. Dude, you learn to swim, you're lining yourself up to drown. Just based on statistics. I was in Bunmahan, like years ago, with some friends of mine, and we walked around the rocks, and we were fiddling around with the rocks, and when we came back, the sea had come in very quickly. and there was no way to get from where we were to the beach, where we needed to get back to, and we were hemmed in by the sea, and none of us could swim. There was 4 of us there, and none of us could swim. So we just stood there, and there was a guy up the cliff, and he said, normally in these situations, he said, I'd drop a rope down to you, but the rope is in Dublin getting repaired. So that's Ireland. Welcome to Ireland. So he said, all right. And then a boat came out and a helicopter came out. It was lovely. It was very nice. Many thousands of pounds of state money went into this unnecessary rescue. The boat picked us up, and the boat dropped us out to wherever they go, and we had to sign in. And we were so shocked. We were so shocked, yeah, in shock at the whole procedure that we signed our real names. I mean, that'll tell you how far gone we were. It was just very strange. And there was a map up on the board in the lifeboat little house thing, and it was full of these like red pins. And she got a green pin and she put it into the map. And I said, "Oh, what's the green pin?" "Oh," she said, "that's you," she said. "We have to make a record, you know." And I said, "What are all the red pins?" "Oh," she said, "they're all the dead bodies we pulled out." So yeah. And she said the best thing you could have done in that situation is not try. Because the beach was literally, now let me not lie, say about 20 yards away, right? The problem was there was just a volume of water between us and the beach. And we were thinking about, like, will we have a go? None of us can swim, but like we were thinking of just if we could just kind of cling to the rocks and sort of paddle over, sort of crab paddle our way across. And then I was thinking, no. And she said, every single one of those red dots, she said, is a swimmer. Someone who said they'd have a go. And what happens is the sea apparently has got some kind of a pull in a force, and it just yanks you out, and then it just fucks you back onto the rocks again, and it just does this a few times until all your bones break, and then even if you could swim, it's no good to you. And you just either wash up on the beach as a pile of, like a bunch of coat hangers in a plastic bag, or they fish you out and you're dead. So, the moral is, don't learn to swim. I understand none of this is about Star Trek and none of this is about aliens. We'll get onto that, don't worry. Alright, let's just talk about some Star Trek. If you've never seen Star Trek, this may mean nothing to you. But if you have seen it, it will definitely mean nothing to you because it's just my personal take on it. Star Trek is a television show about an optimistic future for mankind. They're in the year 2400 exploring space after eliminating crime and misery and money on Earth. Right? And it's really nice. It's nice that we have some kind of a positive role model for the future, regardless of how ridiculous it is. I think it's a very good idea because the tendency now, especially in the last few years when making television shows, is to make it dark, cynical, and that looks like it has more narrative weight in this particular market. So you have something like Game of Thrones, where if something happy happens, it just fills you with suspicion. Right? Someone's happy. Oh, okay, so you're going to be dead by the end of the episode. Right? And that's a cynical... That's not you. You're not the problem. The show is training you to have that level of cynicism. So it's the show that's dark and cynical. Now, I love dark and cynical. But dark and cynical doesn't really work if there's nothing else. You don't want to live in a world just full of suicidal despair. Dark and cynical only works when most people aren't dark and cynical. If you know what I mean. You know? Like the shock value of some of this stuff doesn't really take if it's mainstream. Right? Oh, I can't believe that just happened. Why not? Like literally everybody else also can't believe that just happened, so there's no... You need a bit of... And Star Trek does it wonderfully. They're not just being positive for the sake of it. They're using it to tell wonderful stories. And when they started off in the 60s, the thing about science fiction... Let's just start at the start. The thing about science fiction is great for talking about ideas that you're not allowed to talk about. Or for putting things in a certain way that you might get into trouble. You know? It's fantastic for that. So in the old Star Trek, you could talk about things like racism. There was a episode in the old series during the 1960s where they went to this planet, and all the people on the planet have one side of their face white and one side of the face black. They look like a kind of a like a bit of a chessboard. And the Riddler was in it. What's his name? The guy who plays the Riddler in Batman was in it. Frank Gorshin. And the boys, of course, the Star Trek boys roll into this situation and they're like, "Oh, it's terrible fighting, lads. You should calm your shit down, you know." And they get the two lads talking to each other. And one of the Star Trek, I forget because it's ages ago since I saw it, but one of them says, "How do you even," like they hated each other, the two sides hated each other. And they're always fighting. And they all look like little chessboards. And the guy says, "How do you tell each other apart? Like, how do you know that this guy is the guy you want to hate? You all look the same, right?" Which sounds racist, but wait till the end of the setup, it's actually not. It's just a setup to the not racist bit. And the guy said, "Oh, these guys are black on the left and right, and white on the right, but we're black on the right and white on the left." You see, that's ludicrous, right? It's a ludicrous situation, and it's stupid. And the Star Trek guys were like, "Well, you know, it's ludicrous." That's how ludicrous actual racism is in the real world. And they do kind of hit you over the head with a message, but it's alright because it's a fun story. Like they did the same thing in Babylon 5. Babylon 5 is another science fiction show from the mid to late 90s. And there was these two groups of guys who had to fight each other every few years. And there was the green team and the purple team. And it wasn't even a question of looking different because they picked green, like in Survivor. They just picked green scarves out of a bucket, or purple, and wherever colour you got, that's the team you're on, like on Survivor. And they immediately became very emotionally attached to their arbitrarily assigned team, like in Survivor, and found themselves kind of working out ways to undermine the other guys who also equally arbitrarily were selected as purple because they did a blind test and they did a blind pick of out of the barrel. Actually, the more I think about it, the more Survivor is a stupid show. But anyway, Ivanova goes down to try and sort it out, and she learns that there's one little scarf in the barrel with a star on it or whatever, and he's the leader. And they all, again, it's entirely democratic stupidity, and whoever picks this one by random is the leader. So she just grabbed the scarf with a star on it and said, "So if I have this in my hand right now," she said, "I'm in charge." And they all go, "Yep." And that was the end of that problem. She was just in charge and she decided what to do. But again, when you're looking at that, it's very funny, but it's also kind of like, how could you watch something like that and not think to yourself, "Wow, that's something I've done in the past"? Had an attitude about somebody just... The arbitrary assignment in reality is your parents' heritage, your parents' skin colour, your parents' income level, I suppose, even. That's arbitrary because you have no control over it and it's random from your point of view. You don't get to decide at the age of 20 to have been born to different parents, so it's arbitrary. But people judge each other on these things all the time, and it's equally ridiculous. So that's just one thing. And science fiction does that better than anything else because they transfer it to a different situation completely, where you can examine that and look at it and understand. And then you take the very same thought structure and apply it to your own life and say, "Wow, I've been doing that. What a fool am I?" Like in Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, which is an absurdist play by the Irish lad Samuel Beckett. And the review at the time said nothing happens twice. That's the review of the play, which is true. It's a bunch of two tramps just talking rubbish for a while and waiting for this guy called Godot, who famously never shows up. Spoiler alert! He doesn't show up. But they're talking away and chatting away, and for the whole first act, you're thinking, yeah, all right, I mean, I get it. So what am I watching for? And then the second act is roughly the same thing, but with some new characters, and they're all the same, just kind of wandering around and talking rubbish. And about halfway through the second act, if you're paying attention, it hits you like a brick. Fuck me, like, this is me, this is my life. Samuel Beckett has accurately described 90% of my life. And that's genius. And to do that without it really... It creeps up on you when you're watching it. Like, not... At the start, I suppose you're kind of making fun of other people. Oh, the world is full of idiots, right? But then halfway through it, it's very clear that he's making fun of you. Like, not other people. You. You're the one who's the idiot. And that's cool. I like that. Star Trek is science fiction, and they used the show to tell interesting stories, and also a lot of boring stories, but I'm not interested in those. The good stories. Um, but science fiction, therefore, now science fiction writers will tell you that they want to write about the future, they want to write the possibilities of alien technology, they want to write about the possibilities of our technology and what life might look like on other planets, right? Now let's say that that's true in the sense that that's what they believe. It's probably not true, because anytime you write anything that's speculative or even a pure science fiction thing, anytime you write one of those, it's going to tell you a lot more about you than about the future. That's just how it works. Any science fiction, and you can tell, this is why science fiction gets dated. Like, you can tell if a television show, science fiction television show, was made in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, right? They picked, just for looking at the decor, they picked that decor as intentionally futuristic, right? But it's not, because they're stuck in their own time frame. Like Heidegger said, you're all stuck in your own time space and you can't think your way outside it. That's just part of the human reality. Like, if you look at 2001 now, they did a fantastic job with that show. They did a fantastic job with that show. They're the only movie I've ever seen where the spaceships don't make noise. And that's fantastic. It's wonderful. But the decor is very, very 60s. They have little roundy chairs and the women are dressed like they would be I mean, it's interesting to see what somebody in the 60s would imagine the future looks like. But it's always different to what the actual future looks like, because no one can predict the future. But not only that, but their particular predictions about the future look like they're from the 60s. Right? So if that's true, if it's true of the design, then it's going to be true of the content as well. Sorry, but it is. So whenever you see a science fiction movie made in the 60s, it's going to be full of the kind of things that people in the 60s were worrying about. Nothing to do with the future. So when the Star Trek show was made in the 1960s, it's full of the kind of things that people in the 60s were worried about. Civil rights were going mad in the south of America, in the south of the states, in the southern states like Tennessee and Mississippi and places like that. And there's that in the show, as I just mentioned, one episode. Another episode, of course, is they had the black lady on the bridge. Whoopi Goldberg tells a lovely story of how she saw, the first time she saw Star Trek when she was a little girl, and she ran into her mother, and she says, Mom, she says, there's a black lady on TV and she ain't no maid. Which is lovely. I mean, that's somebody somewhere has to crack the ice, you know? Somebody somewhere has to say, look, this is not going to sit well, but if we want to have any kind of a decent future, somebody has to say it, somebody has to do it, and I guess I'm going to take the shit for it for the next 20 years, but after that we're going to have a better world. And I don't know, personally, if being a glorified telephone operator or receptionist is that much better than being a maid, but somebody somewhere had to crack the ice. And the actress herself, a girl called Nichelle Nichols, she feels it was absolutely trailblazing. And I guess if she felt that inside herself, then it was. And Whoopi Goldberg, it changed her life. That's how she decided she wanted to be an actor. And again, maybe that's not something we should be grateful for, but that's not the point. Also, all the guys in NASA, you go take a random guy who works in NASA and say, why did you get into this? And he'll say, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. Basically, you saw an episode of Star Trek, right? And they'll say, yeah, okay, fine. I saw an episode of Star Trek. Right? People like Lawrence Krauss and what's the black guy called? Neil deGrasse Tyson. These guys are open about how inspired they are by this, what is just a science fiction show. But because it's so positive and so it projects everything in a positive way. Like, we can be better. We can be stronger and faster and better and more caring and more empathetic. That's fantastic stuff. And that somebody is saying that on prime time television in the middle of a very interesting story. It's not just some preacher coming out at you lecturing you. You know? Saying we can be better than we are now, and we should be trying to push towards that the whole time. And that's the message of Star Trek. It's not spaceships and robots and aliens. It's we can be better. Like Doctor Who. I could tell you Doctor Who's about a lad in a telephone box who goes around solving crimes on different planets. That doesn't tell you much. The basic thing about Doctor Who is it makes you want to be a better person. Which, if you were listening to the last podcast, I said is the primary function of literature. I was talking about Hamlet. And I said when you read Hamlet, and it gets you out of your head and you see different ways of looking at things and you learn to appreciate how language works and so on, it should make you want to be a better person. That's the point. And a better person then would, in particular, doesn't mean like I suppose it can mean more skillful. You can pick up more skills or whatever. But when I say a better person, I mean a better human being in the sense of being kinder to people, having more compassion, being more empathetic. Like getting rid of this cynical fucking 1980s, you have to make money or you don't get any respect, and all that's just all cynical trash, man. It's just like that Wall Street thing. I mean, Oliver Stone made Wall Street with Michael Douglas specifically to make fun of that stupid, stupid attitude. It's just a stupid way. I mean, it's not going to help. It's not going to help. We need people to be kinder and more empathetic. And more, well, look, let's see where this guy is coming from. Yes, even with Trump supporters. Right? There's no point in trashing them. I mean, obviously they don't know what they're doing, right? That's clear. Well, that doesn't mean you don't be mean to them. You don't say, oh, you're a racist scumbag. That's not helpful, you know? And in anyway, the mindset of a lot of these people is if a liberal calls them a racist scumbag, that's actually a validation rather than a that they take that as a good thing. Oh yeah, the liberals think I'm a racist scumbag. Cool, must be doing the right thing, and I can understand that attitude too. There's a little bit of a troll in me, so I understand that. There's a lot of a troll in me. I'm 90% troll, so I understand that. So that's not the way forward. The way forward is, look, when you're arguing with someone, or someone appears to be even Hitlerites, even open Nazis. Like at some point, they're not bad people in the sense that they don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, how can I be more evil today? They wake up in the morning and say, how can I protect my interests? How can I look after my family better? And to them, for some reason, they've veered into this Nazi way of looking at things, this far-right nationalist, protect the white race thing. Now, it's based on gibberish, I get that. But you're never going to get anywhere by just, if that's where your thought process ends. These people are assholes, and the stuff they're thinking is gibberish. If that's the end of it, that should be the start of it. If that's the end of your thought process, that's going nowhere. Right? So I'm not saying, oh, we should be more understanding in the sense that we should be, like that we should try to think like a Nazi. I mean that we should be more understanding because they're human beings and so are we. And this is what Star Trek does. Like if you look at the newer Star Trek with Jean-Luc Picard, he deals with people on planets who are utter Nazis in everything but name. And he still does the best he can to try and say, well, how did this situation come about? Why do you think like this? And how can we make it better? Not how can I trash you? You know? How can I make this situation better? To put more kindness and empathy in there. And it goes without saying that anybody promoting the elimination of an entire race of people, that's going to be an uphill struggle. Or maybe not. Maybe when you're that extreme, when you think that all Jews need to be carted off somewhere, that it might be easier with that level of extremity to inject some sort of empathy or some sort of compassion in there. I don't know. All I know is that if you watch enough Star Trek, you cannot but want to be a better person. There's no option. It's just how, if you're paying attention to the shows, and anything that does that is worthwhile. I talked a little bit about Star Trek. I'm going to talk more Star Trek in a little while, about 20 seconds. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, nitrogen bubbles will make your blood boil. You've got the bends. Alright. I'm going to talk about Star Trek. And it's a very positive show, so I'm going to talk about it in a negative, in a cynical way. Why not? No, I'm just going to talk about some of the problems with the basic concept of Star Trek, which, as I said, it's not supposed to be super realistic, but when people get really into the show, they're going to start asking questions like, how does that engine work, and how does this work, and how does that work, and they have to make up some bullshit answers. So the whole thing, obviously, the realities of making a television show, the budget they had to make these sets and to write these stories and so on is the number one factor. But I'm going to pretend like it isn't. I'm going to pretend like none of that matters. So all of these problems really tell you more about the grinding reality of making a television show in 1960s Hollywood and the mindset of the writers at the time than they tell you anything about future technology. But it might be fun to talk about anyway. Well, the first thing is that in Star Trek, it looks as though the universe is full of inhabited planets, or just planets that are suitable for crash landing. They just seem to be around, lying around. Oh, I have to crash land. Let's just dump onto this planet, which handily enough has an atmosphere and something to eat on it. In reality, the universe is spread out. It's spread out a lot. And there's some clumping, but basically everything is really far away from everything else. Even taking account of faster than light travel, which Einstein discovered is not just beyond our current technology, but impossible. It would take so long to get from one place to another that there just wouldn't be any point. Like right now, scientists, you'll see in the news sometimes, they'll say, oh, we found a planet that might have life on it 200 million light years away, right? What that means is, it's so far away that it takes a beam of light 200 million years to get there. So let's say, forget about people, let's say we send a message, and the message is blink blink, 2 points of light. That message is going to take 200 million years to get there. And by the time it gets there, either we'll be dead and gone and wiped out, or they will. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say there is somebody there and they get the message and they send back another blink blink, just to let us know that they're there. It'll take another 200 million years for that message to get here. And we'll definitely be gone by the time of 400 million years. Either that or we'll be so evolved that it'll just be nonsense to us. We'll evolve into something else. Unrecognizable to us right now. 400 million years. And that's just to say blink blink. Sending a man, sending a message. Also, at the moment, this is all theory. We are the only inhabited planet that we know of. So, that doesn't make any sense. Also, as I mentioned before, in space, the tagline on Alien was, "In space no one can hear you scream." The Ridley Scott movie. But of course in space no one can hear anything, because sound has to travel through something. On our planet here it travels through air. It can travel through water, but it can't travel through nothing. And most of space, like the vast majority of space, over 99.9% of space, is nothing. So you won't be able to hear anything. I could scream right beside your head and you won't be able to hear it. You won't be able to hear anything. But in Star Trek, it's all noises. Because you're making a TV show, and it has to be interesting. And no one's going to sit through silence. They almost did it in Battlestar Galactica, the television show. They almost got it. Any outdoor shots are kind of, what would you call it, dampened, sound-wise. But 2001 gets it bang on. Total silence. And instead they just play classical music over it. They will not classical music. They play Strauss waltzes over it. Would you call that classical? Strauss waltzes? I don't know. But it's nice. And it's the way it would be. Not the waltz. It would be total silence. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? If you went into space and waltzes everywhere. Where's that noise coming from? I do not know. Is that Strauss? Yeah, they have Strauss out here in space as well. Apparently. No. Nothing. Blank. In space, no one can hear anything. Now another problem is time. This is kind of difficult to conceptualize, but time isn't really static. No, if you've watched Doctor Who, you'll learn that time isn't static. But in Star Trek, they phone up people on a little video phone millions of miles away as if they were having like a normal telephone call. Now that's incoherent under any system of thinking. Incoherent. Like the time we have now, we have it divided up into minutes and seconds and days and so on. Like a day is 24 hours, and we're so used to that system that it's kind of in our brains that that's what time is, but it's not. Time isn't that at all. Like if we did land people on Mars, like think about this. Let's say we have a colony on Mars. Now Mars is millions of miles away and has its own little cycle. So let's say we have a colony on Mars, right? And they're there for a few months or whatever. And then somebody rings up and says, and I asked the guy on Mars, what time is it? Right? That's an incoherent question. It makes no sense. What's he going to say? What time is it where I am? Well, if you're going to say what time is it where I am, you might as well just, like, it's not like in Ireland where they have different time, or on the planet Earth, I mean, where they have different time zones, and the time zones make sense inside that system. Like I can say that New York is 5 hours behind Ireland, and that's going to be consistent within the system. So if it's 12 o'clock here, it'll be 7 o'clock in New York, and so on. And you can rely on that. But on Mars, it has its own orbit, it has its own rotation. Man, there's no way to work that out. And that's just on Mars. So how the hell am I going to work out on different galaxies and different solar systems? What time is it there? And also, when you travel at the speed of light, you get around time. So if you travel in the speed of light for, say, an hour that way and an hour back, you've had 2 hours, but everybody here has had maybe days. I don't know what the math on it is, but it's different. It is not the same. So I don't know. You go in this Star Trek thing. They travel at the speed of light, at warp speed they call it, from one planet to another, and say it takes 2 days to get there. So a month would have passed in the place where they just came from, and they phone back, and that message should take, if it's 2 light days, it should take 2 days to get there. But it's just like they're talking to on a telephone call. It makes no sense at all. Again, 2001, the Stanley Kubrick movie, gets this right. And how they get this right is the 2 boys are on a spaceship, and it takes, I forget the number, but I think it was 9 minutes. When they call home to NASA, it takes 9 minutes for that message to get there, and another 9 minutes for their answer to come back. Right? Because they're that far out from Earth on the way to Jupiter. And that was realistic. And in the movie, they tell you, because it's part of a television show, it's very well constructed because it means now they can tell you this. But the presenter on the TV show who's interviewing the 2 boys, he's the guy who says it, because you can't just come out and say something like that. It's too exposition-y. But the guy on the television can, a guy working for the BBC, the world tonight. I remember the theme tune from the fake TV show Inside 2001. That's not good. That is not a good sign. That's not good. Anyway, it's just too geeky for words. Yeah, but they got it right. And he says, oh, we're going to edit out the 9 minutes of dead airtime between when they get the message and when the message comes back here. And that's fine. Now, once you've acknowledged it, you're fine. And they did. And 2001 got that correct as well. You can only imagine how awkward it would be trying to talk to somebody who's millions of miles away. Millions of light years away. So Star Trek, along with every other science fiction show in the world, I suppose, apart from 2001, gets that horribly wrong. Not just the fundamental nature of time, which is deeply subjective, but the factual, objective nature of time, which is based on physics and Einstein's theory of relativity, and the whole thing is just a mess. Time after time. Yep, that's how it works. Another thing they have on Star Trek, again, because for budgetary reasons, they developed this thing called a transporter, which magically demolecularizes you and reassembles you on wherever you want to go, on the bottom of the planet. How it's supposed to work is it maps all your... Technology gets to the state where we're able to map all your molecules and your atoms, and it just keeps a record of that, and then takes you apart, and then puts you back together again using that map that it created first, and you're still reassembled with your original personality, and you don't notice any difference. You just walk out. Right, now that's just ridiculous on the face of it, but there is a particular rule of physics which prevents that from happening called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, I think. And it says that you can never know the speed and location of a subatomic particle at any time. Right? You can never know both the speed and the subatomic and the speed and the position of any subatomic particle at the same time. Now, it's not that we don't have the technology for it. It's not that we don't know how to do it yet. It's that it cannot be done ever. There's no way to do it, because the simple act of measuring something changes it at that level. Tiny little level. So there's no way, it's not possible to map somebody's subatomic structure and then reassemble it. Never mind about how much energy it would take to reassemble it. But it's impossible. It cannot be done. Which is why, if you look at the plans for a transporter room, they always have a little box at the back and it says Heisenberg compensator. Right? Heisenberg compensator. It's like, that's definitely a Deus Ex Machina. It's like, if there's a problem here. Say there's a physics law called the Smith law of whatever, and it prevents this from happening. Oh, don't worry, yeah, it's the Smith compensator. Really? Yeah. Yeah, I'm flying right now. How are you flying? What about gravity? Oh, don't worry, I've installed a gravity compensator on my back. Yeah, but it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't stop the show from being fun. It's just never going to happen. Like people say, when will we have transporters? Never. Heisenberg figured this out decades ago. We will never have a transporter. It's never going to work. But they're able to move a quantum particle with the spin. Yeah, no, it's never going to happen. Right? Just get that into your head. It's never going to happen. Another thing is, again, due to budget concerns, all the aliens are just basically made up humans. Made up in the sense of wearing a lot of makeup. So most of the aliens will be humanoid with bits attached. And there is no reason in the world or anywhere else to assume that this is what aliens are going to look like if they exist. They might be flat like pancakes, they might be on wheels, we don't know. We don't know. And particularly on planets that have different, even just something as basic as gravity. A much larger planet will have a much larger gravity, and that's going to affect the structure of these. I suppose they'll be squat little things, or if it's a much lighter planet, might be much taller. I don't know what the thing is, but they're not going to be all roughly human-sized. That would be deeply peculiar. You know? Why would they be? They'd have to evolve in response to their own environment. And there's no way their environment is going to pop up exactly the same as it has here. Like, what are the chances of that? 0. But for budget reasons? Yeah, sure. Put on a latex helmet there and we'll paint you green. Fantastic. Why not? The story just has to make you alien. It doesn't have to, but realistically, if it's ever going to happen, these aliens are... We don't know. We might not be able to communicate with them. They might be so different. There might be no way, like, these scientists are saying, oh, we'll put down pi, and we'll scratch out the digits of pi on a metal plate and shove it onto a satellite and send it out. How do you know that? They made no way of accessing that information. They might communicate solely through a bunch of high-pitched squeals that we find indistinguishable. They might communicate just using movements. We don't know. They might communicate using means that are so unavailable to us that it's effectively telepathy, even though it's not. Or maybe they've worked out a way to do telepathy. I don't know. But that doesn't work for a budget. You can't do that in a budget. Also, it strikes me as very odd that all the aliens in Star Trek, and again this applies to a lot of science fiction shows, that all the aliens appear to be culturally homogenous, in that they all seem to have the same religion, they all look more or less the same, they have the same religion and political outlook and so on. I understand this is necessary for narrative reasons and budget reasons, but that doesn't strike me as... I mean, in this planet, like, we come in all sorts of different colours. You know what? I think if there's any aliens listening to this, there's a thing, race. We need to talk about race, okay? And this isn't for any of the listeners to this podcast. This is just for the aliens who are monitoring our communications, alright? This is for you guys. Humans come in a few different colours, called races. And the colours vary from a very dark brown to a very pale pink. And pretty much all the points along that spectrum are represented, at some more than others. There's a bit of clumping in certain areas. Now, because race is a spectrum, and because ethnic heritage is often very difficult to nail down, and because race has no inherent effect on any human whatsoever, smarter humans regard race as an incoherent concept. The people who study it, biologists and so on. However, humans are often pre-sorted by other humans into categories of expected behaviour, social status, political affiliation and so on, based on nothing more than their race. And when you do that, humans call this racism. Right? Do not point out when humans are being racist. Although they understand the concept, they find it very difficult to accept when it applies to their particular behaviour, beliefs or actions. Always make sure someone else is being racist, not the person you're talking to. Okay? That's it. That's the little bit for the aliens. Welcome back, listeners. Yeah. So it's odd that if we're all different colours and different political outlooks, it's odd that you would expect aliens to not be like that. Why wouldn't alien planets all be different colours and... No, these aliens are green. These aliens are red. Klingons look like this, and so on. Babylon 5, which is one of the greatest science fiction shows ever made, and maybe I should have been talking about this instead of Star Trek, but Star Trek is more culturally embedded. Babylon 5 addressed this head on one day when they had some sort of a festival and they wanted all the alien races to have somebody representing their religious beliefs. So they had like one guy and he's like, we believe this, and another guy and he believes this, and the Earth guy was like, oh, what am I going to do? And at the end of the show, he just got one of every religion. He said, here's Timmy, he's a rabbi. Here's Tommy, he's a Catholic. Here's Shawneen, he's a Hindu, and Shawneen would not be a Hindu. But is there any Shawneen Hindu? Well, maybe in the 24th century. So, and he just went down along. So that was kind of what they call lampshading this difficulty in science fiction shows, that they all seem to have the same look and the same opinion. Very strange. Like, only from a realistic point of view. Obviously, in a storytelling point of view, it's extremely convenient if everybody who is green is also a communist. You know, I mean, that makes things so much easier. Because you don't want everybody having a load of different opinions like humans do. Humans are useless. On Star Trek, this is Star Trek again. Yeah, I told you I'd be talking about Star Trek. Calm down. On Star Trek, they have this thing called the Prime Directive. Now, the Prime Directive is an engagement protocol which essentially dictates a policy of non-interference with less developed worlds, right? Who should be allowed to progress in the natural way. Even just revealing yourself as an alien in the world with no experience of aliens could dramatically influence their entire culture. That's the logic. Human experience, like what you know, think about it. Human experience has demonstrated that every single time a culture interacted with a less developed culture, however well intentioned, it was catastrophic for the less developed culture. So the Prime Directive was written by the Star Trek people in the wake of this 100% hit rate. 100% is a big hit rate. So that's why they have the Prime Directive. You're not supposed to interfere with any less developed worlds, right? Which means, you know, I always had a problem with it. I mean, I don't care that they break it in every episode because they have to. I understand it if a show is based on alien encounters, it's not going to get very far if they never encounter any aliens, right? And I'm all for breaking all the rules if it makes things funny or interesting. The problem I have is with the theory, and the problem I have is based on Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, right? Which doesn't work for everything, but it should definitely apply to this sort of situation. So let's assume for a moment that the Prime Directive is a good idea. Okay? And if it's a good idea, in this case, given the very nature and using Kant's categorical imperative, it's going to be a good idea for all people and all planets everywhere, all species. And as all species everywhere will be at different rates of development, no one's ever going to talk to anyone, because they'll all be at slightly different rates of development. Right? And if any Starfleet officers, the Star Trek guys are called Starfleet officers, they're in Starfleet. If any Starfleet officers meet any civilization that's more advanced, they should just back off or face their own annihilation. Using their own logic, if they ever come across anybody that's more developed than themselves, they should just back away, they should moonwalk out of the kitchen. They never do. Ever. They always want to learn more about them, they want to develop technology, they want to find the cure to cancer, they want to make our ships more efficient, or whatever. Right? So, some logical conclusions are: 1. The Prime Directive is a good idea and we should never interact with other aliens. 2. The Prime Directive's criteria for what counts as more advanced or less advanced are so broad that the terms are essentially meaningless. 3. The Prime Directive is total bullshit. 4. The Prime Directive only applies to situations where another civilization might benefit from our progress, itself at least partially mined from more advanced civilizations, which makes us hypocritical assholes. Right? Those are 4 conclusions, just from watching Star Trek and the Prime Directive. I'll go over those again, because I'm doing my impression of Alexander Armstrong in the second round. I'll go over those again. The Prime Directive is a good idea and we should never interact with other aliens. The Prime Directive's criteria for what counts as more advanced or less advanced are so broad that the terms are essentially meaningless. The Prime Directive is total bullshit, and the Prime Directive only applies to situations where another civilization might benefit from our progress, which is itself at least partially mined from more advanced civilizations, which makes us hypocritical assholes. Now those 4 conclusions, which all come from the initial premises that I talked about before, do not work together. Some of them are mutually exclusive, and that's the problem I have with the Prime Directive. You know what? I'm starting to think that maybe that doesn't come across very well through the medium of the spoken word. It would come across better in chart form. I'm not going to do it. Calm down. It's not going to happen. But that's probably what I should have done. That is all I have to say about Star Trek. So that's pretty much all I have to say about aliens. And I realise most of that was in fact about Star Trek and not aliens. But I don't care, and neither should you. Alien life on other planets is certainly possible, but it's unlikely, very, very unlikely, that we'll ever know anything about them or them about us. Or they about we, whatever way that works. The timescale involved is so massive that the window of opportunity between our rise and fall as a space-aware species and their rise and fall as a space-aware species is tiny. And the distances are so great that it would require more generations that we've had since recorded history to send even a message to the nearest planet capable of supporting life. So none of it makes any sense. The alien thing. I'm going to talk about strange noises that have been attributed to aliens. Sometimes people hear noises. I don't mean squeaky noises, I mean like banging noises in the sky. Possibly fictional noises. A famous one happened in Bristol in 1979. A bunch of people heard a low buzzing sound throughout the city and around the city of Bristol. Efforts to track it down met with failure, and scientists are still trying to work it out. The most common explanation is that it's all in their minds. That a bunch of people just invented this noise in their minds, which seems very strange, but it's certainly not without precedent. If anyone knows about the miracle of Fatima, a bunch of people clearly invented that in their minds. There are also reports from all over the world, and more recently they're concentrated in America, of people hearing sonic booms when there was nothing sonic around to boom at them. The obvious explanation that it's from an unseen aircraft doesn't apply to all of these because many reports predate the invention of the airplane. There are other reasonable explanations, such as meteorites speeding through the atmosphere at an oblique angle, which could, of course, happen depending on how it was deflected. If you look up a thing called the bloop, B-L-O-O-P, on YouTube, you'll hear an actual recording made by NOAA in NOAA, sorry. NOAA's not a guy's name, it's an organization. In 1997 that they have yet to explain. Right, so you can hear it if you go on YouTube. Now this is obviously an actual noise, but theories vary wildly as to what might have caused it. It's very, very loud. On the YouTube, it's not that loud because the receptor is far away. And it carried over 5,000 miles. Some highly imaginative people have guessed that it might be a sort of giant sea animal that we haven't found yet. But there's also more sensible explanations like seismic activity to iceberg calving. Calving icebergs is when a big chunk falls off into the sea. They call it calving. My guess is they could be malfunctioning equipment. If there's some fundamental flaw in how these sound detection devices are made, then it would pick up this noise over and over and over, and there would never be any sensible explanation for it, which is what's been happening. So I think because if it was iceberg calving, it would be you would expect it to be different, because icebergs don't calve at the same rate all the time. That would be ludicrous. And seismic activity doesn't occur at the same intensity in the same place all the time. So that's funny. But if it was a malfunctioning equipment, it could certainly report the same noise at the same rate over and over again. Yeah, the malfunctioning equipment does sound a bit far-fetched, and it's definitely unromantic. But it did explain the flying rod flap of the mid-90s. Flying rods were images of long helix-like insects which kept showing up in video footage, even though they were invisible to the naked eye. You can look this up as well, by the way, on YouTube. Just look up flying rods. And there's a bunch of these helix kind of long stick insecty twisty things that were captured on film video footage when you pause it, and sometimes they fill the air. There's bunches of them that nobody saw at the time. They're only coming up on the video footage, right? So of course people, I don't know, all sorts of reasons were proposed as to what the hell these things are. And if you look at them, if you see the footage, they are genuinely scary. I mean, they're deeply troubling, right? Now these guys didn't fuck with the footage, like they weren't photoshopping them in. It was just something that popped up on the screen like a horror movie. You know, where you take a video and you watch it later and there's a big scary monster behind you the whole time and you never saw him. That's the level, except in real life. And they're called flying rods. And I say a flying rod flap. A flap is what you call a collection of unexplained sightings of something. They call it a flap. I don't know why. And this happened in the mid-90s. And I remember because I was buying 40 Times magazine every week in the mid-90s, watching these flying rods pop up everywhere. It was scary stuff. Suggestions included A new form of insect, which it's not altogether a ludicrous suggestion. Skyfish, which is a ludicrous suggestion, and alien invaders. Aliens. Why not? Anticlimactically, it turned out to be a side effect of the frame capture rate of the video cameras being used. That was the explanation. It was a side effect of the frame capture rate of the video cameras being used. That's it. There were flies, in other words, there were little flies or little birds, and because of the frame capture rate, the birds were moving so fast that it captured an entire sequence of bird activity or of fly activity. So when the bird's wings were flapping and moving, it looked like a long thing with a spiral around it. Now, of course, there's people who just want to believe in aliens, like Mulder. He wants to believe. And there's other people who want to believe in giant invisible animals flying around in the air. They're not going to believe it, but there it is. It's a side effect of the frame capture rate of video cameras, the flying rods. And I think, as far as I know, now they've dealt with it. Like, everything's digital now, so they've dealt with that problem. They still don't know what the bloop is. If you have an idea about what the bloop is, feel free to contact Noah, and you will see their details when you Google it on YouTube, or you Google it. When you Google it, look it up on YouTube, you'll see the details of how to contact the NOAA Noah and collect your Nobel Prize. Interesting stuff. That's it, I'm done. My last podcast, which was about Hamlet, honestly, it was about as much about Hamlet as this was about aliens, let's be honest. At current, it has 21 views and 1 upvote. So basically, I'm talking to myself. 21 views and 1 upvote. I don't mind talking to myself, but it takes a certain amount of time and effort to nail these things together. You know, like, I'm not blowing smoke up my own arse, but I think it's fair to say that the amount of time and effort it takes to put this together is greater than 0. All right. So I might not bother doing these things anymore. I'll instead of doing a podcast no one listens to, I'll just keep writing blog posts no one reads. Sorry. I keep writing things that no one reads instead of talking into a microphone for no one to listen to, which is a shame because I like doing these podcasts. I don't know. You see, maybe I should do some more. I don't know what the tipping point is. Like, how many podcasts should I do before giving up and saying this is not going to make me a millionaire or even a euro-air, even going to earn me a single euro? This is the 7th one, so feel free to suggest some sort of answer. I don't know how many I should do before saying, look, this is ludicrous. Only 5 people are listening to this, and I could just phone them up and tell them, or just write them a letter or something to be easier. Anyway, as ever, if you liked it, tell your friends. If you didn't like it, please tell everyone you know. Complain about it as loudly as possible. Right? If you want to see more of these things, put it on your blog, your Facebook, your Twitter. Just link to it. It's not going to kill you. Right? Link other people to it. Tell other people, look at this guy, what he's doing. What an idiot. Or look at this guy, what he's doing. Some of what he says is interesting. Otherwise, I'm going to be screaming into the void forever. And I am